The state of Greece from the earliest times to the commencement of the Peloponnesian War. An Athenian wrote the history of the war between the Peloponnesians and the Athenians, beginning at the moment it broke out, believing that it would be a great war and more worthy of record than any that had preceded it. This belief was not without foundation. The preparations of both combatants were, in every department, in the highest state of perfection. He could see the rest of the Hellenic race taking sides in the quarrel, while those who delayed doing so had it clearly in contemplation. Indeed, this was the greatest movement yet known in history, not only of the Hellenes, but of a large part of the barbarian world, and almost, one might say, of mankind. For though the events of remote antiquity, and even those that more immediately preceded the war, could not, from the lapse of time, be clearly ascertained, yet the evidence obtained from an inquiry carried as far back as was practicable led him to trust that there had been nothing on a similar scale, either in war or in other matters. For instance, it is evident that the country now called Hellas had in ancient times no settled population. On the contrary, migrations were of frequent occurrence, the several tribes readily abandoning their homes under the pressure of superior numbers. Without commerce, without freedom of communication either by land or sea, cultivating no more of their territory than the necessities of life required, destitute of capital, and never planting their land, since they could not tell when an invader might come and take it all away, and when he did come, they had no walls to stop him, thinking that the necessities of daily sustenance could be supplied in one place as well as another. They cared little for shifting their habitation. Consequently, they neither built large cities nor attained to any other form of greatness. The richest soils were always the most subject to changes of masters, such as the districts now called Thessaly, Boeotia, most of the Peloponnese, Arcadia excepted, and the most fertile parts of the rest of Hellas. The goodness of the land favored the aggrandizement of particular individuals and thus created faction, which proved a fertile source of ruin. It also invited invasion. Accordingly, Attica, from the poverty of its soil, enjoying from a very remote period freedom from faction, never changed its inhabitants. This is no inconsiderable proof of my assertion that migrations were the cause of there being no corresponding growth in other parts of Hellas. The most powerful victims of war or faction from the rest of Hellas took refuge with the Athenians as a safe retreat, and at an early period, becoming naturalized, swelled the already large population of the city to such an extent that Attica became at last too small to contain them. They were therefore compelled to send out colonies to Ionia. There is also another circumstance that contributes, not a little, to my conviction of the weakness of ancient times. Before the Trojan War, there is no indication of any common action in Hellas, nor indeed of the universal prevalence of the name. On the contrary, before the time of Hellen, son of Deucalion, such an appellation did not exist, and the country went by the names of the different tribes, in particular that of the Pelasgian. It was not until Hellen and his sons grew strong in Pythiottis and were invited as allies into other cities that they gradually acquired, through this connection, the name of Hellenes, though a long time elapsed before that name could establish itself among all. The best proof of this is furnished by Homer. Born long after the Trojan War, he nowhere calls all of them by that name, nor indeed any of them except the followers of Achilles from Phthiotis, who were the original Hellenes. In his poems they are called Danaans, Argives, and Achaeans. He does not even use the term barbarian, probably because the Hellenes had not yet been marked off from the rest of the world by one distinctive appellation. It appears, therefore, that the several Hellenic communities, comprising not only those who first acquired the name city by city as they came to understand one another, but also those who assumed it afterward as the name of the whole people, were before the Trojan War prevented by their lack of strength and the absence of mutual intercourse from displaying any collective action. Indeed, they could not unite for this expedition until they had gained increased familiarity with the sea. The first person known to us by tradition as having established a navy is Minos. He made himself master of what is now called the Hellenic Sea and ruled over the Cyclades, into most of which he sent the first colonies, expelling the Carians and appointing his own sons as governors. Thus he did his best to put down piracy in those waters, a necessary step to secure the revenues for his own use. For in early times, both the Hellenes and the barbarians of the coast and islands, as communication by sea became more common, were tempted to turn pirates under the leadership of their most powerful men, the motives being to satisfy their own greed and to support the needy. They would fall upon a town unprotected by walls and consisting of a mere collection of villages and plunder it. Indeed, this came to be the main source of their livelihood, no disgrace being yet attached to such an achievement, but even some glory. An illustration of this is furnished by the honor with which some inhabitants of the continent still regard a successful marauder, and by the question which the old poets everywhere represent people as asking of voyagers: are they pirates? As if those questioned would have no thought of disclaiming the charge, nor their interrogators of reproaching them for it. The same practice of plunder prevailed by land. Even at the present day, many parts of Hellas still follow the old fashion. The Azolian Locrians, for instance, the Aetolians, the Acarnanians, and other regions of the continent. The custom of carrying arms is still maintained among these continental peoples, owing to their ancient piratical habits. The whole of Hellas once carried arms, their habitations being unprotected and their communications with one another unsafe. Indeed, to wear arms was as much a part of everyday life with them as with the barbarians. The fact that people in these regions still live in the old way points to a time when the same mode of life was once equally common to all. The Athenians were the first to lay aside their weapons and adopt an easier and more luxurious way of life. Indeed, it is only recently that their wealthy elders ceased wearing linen undergarments and fastening a knot of their hair with a tie shaped like a golden grasshopper, a fashion that spread to their Ionian kinsmen and long prevailed among the older men there. By contrast, a more modest style of dress, more in conformity with modern ideas, was first adopted by the Lacedaemonians, the wealthy among them striving to assimilate their way of life to that of the common people. They also set the example of competing naked, publicly stripping and anointing themselves with oil in their gymnastic exercises. Formerly, even in the Olympic contests, athletes wore belts around their waists, and it is only in recent years that this practice ceased. To this day, among some of the barbarians, especially in Asia, when prizes for boxing and wrestling are offered, belts are still worn by the competitors. There are many other points in which a likeness might be shown between the life of the ancient Hellenic world and that of the barbarians of today.